Okay. All right. Sounds like we've got some last minute people coming in. We'll give it just another second or two. All our panelists are here now. I see everybody. Okay, the ding dongs seem to have slowed down, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I am Carrie Birchfield. I am recently cycled off as a University of Kentucky staff senator, but I wanted to stay on just for this call today because we did have to cancel it last minute due to the power outage on campus. But I'm so excited to see so many of you guys came back for this session now, and we're just going to go ahead and get started. So today we're going to learn all about podcasts. I know, especially during this last year and a half, we've had a lot of time to ourselves. We've been listening to a lot more things on streaming services, on our phones, and this is one that's kind of been really popular on people's minds. How do I get started? What do I do? So this is going to be all about how to start your very first podcast. I'm going to go ahead and introduce briefly our panelists. We have Joe Lewis, Jacob Hester, Ryan Story, and Jason Carr. Jason unfortunately had a last minute scheduling conflict. He's going to hop on if he can, but he got called into a meeting. That's a bummer. But we're just going to start with Jacob, if you don't mind, if you would unmute yourself and just introduce yourself and tell us about your podcast and how you got started.
Yeah, so I'm Jacob Hester. I'm a wellness specialist with UK HR Health and Wellness, and I produce and host Becoming Wildly Resilient. So it's a monthly podcast, kind of long form interview style, but basically we're just exploring different areas, different dimensions of your well-being with different experts from around the university community. So our goal is really to help listeners thrive both personally and professionally. So we're actually celebrating 1 year today, coincidentally. I released an episode this morning that is a recap of the last year. So really perfect timing for this event. So I really appreciate you having me on here. But yeah, as far as kind of getting started, it really was an idea that was in a sort of big picture brainstorming session that we had a couple of years ago. Then slowly kind of became a reality as we were looking for new ways to connect with employees, particularly digitally. And so we actually, I'd like to say that we started it because of the pandemic and we needed something to do from home and that kind of thing. But it was actually in the works well before that. So I spent quite a few months just researching different podcasts, really listening. So I'll take a second to shout out a couple that aren't on here, like Talking Facts from Extension and Champions of Active Women from Sports Medicine Research Institute. They were ones that are also in the UK system that I listened to try to draw some inspiration from. And we kind of continue to work from there on things like a name and how I wanted the format to be and all that sort of stuff. So we'll kind of, I guess, kind of jump into that here in a little bit. But yeah, that's kind of the nuts and bolts of the story of Becoming Wildly Resilient.
Oh, well, great. Thank you so much. And congratulations on your first year. That's very exciting. We're going to move next to Joe Lewis. Joe, if you don't mind introducing yourself and telling us about your podcast.
Hey, I'm Joe Lewis. I'm the Director of Academic Advising, and Jacob sounds way more professional than me, so I should never have followed him. He's actually doing something that's helpful for people. My podcast has nothing to do with being helpful for folks. Mine is not affiliated with UK. To actually this week, We'll mark 4 years. We're almost at 200 episodes. It's called Bonehead Weekly. It's me and my two best friends, Ched Jennings and James Thomas, and we've been doing it, like I said, for 4 years. And we've talked pop culture, mainly movies, some books, television, things like that. We interview folks throughout the industry, mainly directors, writers, some production designers, artists, who have you. We like a lot of behind the scenes folks. Our backgrounds are all in, well, mine and Chad's are in filmmaking, communication, stuff like that. Back in the day, I do moderating for Lexington Comic-Con, Scarefest, and a few other conventions outside. So that's led to some contacts that help us a little bit. And that's it in a short nutshell. Oh, so you can't hear me? Posted. Can you speak a little louder? Were you unable to hear me? I'm looking for some.
I can hear you fine. I can hear you fine.
Heard you fine.
Okay, good deal. If it's me, I'm on my phone, so I will try to speak just a little more clearly if that is helpful to everyone. We're going to go next to Ryan Story. Ryan, if you don't mind introducing yourself and telling us about your podcast.
Hi, I'm Ryan Story. I'm an advisor in the College of Communication. So I host a podcast that is a personal podcast that I started at the beginning of quarantine, about April 2020, with just some friends. It's a comedy debate show, like Joe. Like, we are not contributing to society at all. It is just for fun, something we enjoy doing, and spend a way to be able to spend time with each other during the pandemic without being in person. And then I host and produce a podcast for the Staff Senate called the Kentucky Wildcast. We only have a few episodes of that just because it is on top of my regular job, not actually part of my job description. So it's something I have to find time to do and schedule and things like that. But the Kentucky podcast is basically one where I'm interviewing staff members. The tagline is people that make the impossible possible at UK. So just a bunch. I think we've had 6 different episodes of just people that work in different levels at UK, and we hope to continue that in the future. But as the Staff Senate is turning over, we'll have to find some new people and some new roles there. But yeah, my other podcast is called Tell Me I'm Wrong, and it's just a bunch of silly comedy debates.
Great, thank you so much. And I'm assuming that both yours and Joe's are available wherever you find podcasts. I know Joe's, you have yours, you stream on a lot of services and on YouTube. And Ryan, I'm assuming that you do too. And we'll make sure that we recap that at the end so that everybody can know where to find you. So we're going to jump into the next question, which is, what do beginners need to know before starting their own podcast? Jacob, we're going to kick that one to you.
All right. So I think kind of the biggest takeaway I think I've learned would really to just be yourself. It's such a flexible format that you can mold to your unique personality, to the personality of your audience or who you're trying to reach. So there's really, to me, there's not really a right or wrong way. If you listen to a lot of different podcasts, you'll hear a lot of different ways that they're approached, whether they're, short 5 to 15 minutes or whether they're an hour and a half, 2 hours long. It's really, I think that's kind of the fun thing about podcasts is it's so flexible and you can do sort of what you want. So I think my recommendation would be to listen to a lot of podcasts and draw upon the elements that you like from each, but really staying true to yourself and your idea in the process too. I think kind of one of the other big key pieces I would say is particularly if you're going to go into like the editing side of things and doing the producing and that type of thing too, it's probably going to take you more time than you think. I had my expectations, I think were definitely passed as far as how much time it would take, but you get better at it as you go too. So the amount of time I spend now on an episode versus the amount of time I spent last July is very different. So definitely a little extra time for yourself if you're getting started, especially if you don't know how or have limited working knowledge of how to edit and do those types of things. Great, thanks. And Joe, I forgot to congratulate you on 4 years of Bonehead Weekly. I
should be remiss in that since I'm an avid listener, I should know. I'm going to kind of piggyback on something that Jacob said. I know that you had a longtime producer and director, Haley, and that you guys are kind of doing that all yourself now. So how has that kind of changed for you in your planning and your process?
Well, that's a very good question. So yeah, we we started out with a full-time producer, which was really nice. And we had, when I get questions about, well, where do you want to go? And well, we were more successful than we thought we would be, but you always want to be more successful. So as she transitioned out to do other things, it kind of got bored dealing, wrangling cats of the three of us. And it was a lot of work too, as far as you're always trying. I don't know about the other two folks on here, but guests, we have a lot of guests. So, a lot of people are in LA. That's a 3-hour time difference, or they're in Nova Scotia. They can be anywhere. And trying to figure out that schedule, it just got tough. So for me, my background is in broadcasting. So we use Premiere for a lot of our editing. That's just particularly what I have. Also, we do a YouTube version. So there's a video version and an audio version. And thank you so much, Carrie. You can find us on all podcast platforms. I appreciate that. Subscribe to Bonehead Weekly. Anyway, that's beside the point. That all kind of fell on me. And we started the podcast 2 weeks before my first son was born. And that's how I always remember that it's right at 4 years, because he'll be 4 years this week. And that my advice to a lot of people is that people kind of talk and just do it. And I'm assuming my colleagues that just do it. If I can do it right before the kid was born and then take over all the producing as far as the video editing and all the other stuff, just do it. And I would not put a ton of money into it, is my other second advice. There are fabulous microphones that are cheap. In fact, I wouldn't spend more than $100 to $200 on the whole setup. Just use your laptop, use whatever you've got, and roll on from there.
That's an important enough point that I'm going to reiterate. If you are worried about the being cost prohibitive, or like worrying that you have to get like a SM7B microphone and an audio interface and all that stuff, we produce what I am very proud of audio quality wise, and we're using USB microphones that we all got for less than $100. I mean, editing software, you can get free stuff. That obviously the pay for stuff is a lot nicer and will help you go a lot quicker, but you can start podcasting for less than $100 and stay at that level forever if you want.
Yeah. And if you listen to a lot of really good shows, people who have sponsors, and I'm not telling you to go out and compare and contrast, but I've listened to some of our episodes. Specifically now, Zoom is great. Zoom's wonderful. It's gotten much better. And sometimes we sound better than people who are spending a lot of money. So I'm probably going to update to a Shure microphone just for myself, because we're no end in sight right now for us. However, for you all, I don't know about my colleagues, a Blue Yeti is fine. Not a lot of money there, and they're just great.
Absolutely. I'd jump on that as well. Blue Yeti is what I use. We had one.
Blue is currently what I'm using as well.
Yeah. We had one in our office, and we were using it sparingly for different presentations and those types of things. So I wanted to get some more use out of it. And they are, like you said, they're relatively inexpensive. You can catch them for around $100, and it's been more than good enough to this point. And I mean, I may eventually, if we continue on for years and years and years, may update this stuff. But I mean, you can get started, like I said, with pretty much nothing.
Real quick, there's a great question. Do you mind if I grab it, Carrie?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Actually, I can speak about this one. So where we failed at starting Bonehead Weekly, and we were very successful, are two different things. But what we're really successal were is how do you handle trademark, copyright names to your show? So the name is weird, but it comes from something that we did years ago that I won't get into. But what I did was actually pay an artist to do our actual seal, Bonehead Weekly, and to do it original. So we did a really good job with that. You can go ahead and start, if you think you're going to go for a while, there's LLCs and things I can talk to you about afterwards that we'll be getting into the weeds here. But I also am fortunate enough that I know some artists, know some musicians. Another friend of mine did the music. So it was all original, cost me very little, maybe a $20 here, $50 there, just to help out people. It's like, oh my God, you're going to pay me for this? Yes, I'm going to pay you for this. And always pay the artist. So that's what I would say is spend very little money. And if you have some artist friends, and if you don't, you can contact me and put a little pizzazz. Don't just do kind of a PowerPoint thing. Hire an artist, do something fun. Won't cost you a lot of money. A lot of them will be great. They're in their end credits every week. They get advertising every week, like music by, art by. So that's just a suggestion I would make.
Yeah, go ahead, guys. Go ahead and jump in whenever you need to.
One additional note about like getting started. What I don't know if the other guys would agree with this. We wanted to, really start out and like make sure that we were producing at a level we could continue with from the beginning. So we weren't like having audio quality issues or anything from the start. We wanted to make sure we're putting out a good show. So what I would recommend is record 2, maybe even 3 episodes before you release them. Show them to a couple friends, or just listen to them a couple times and see if you like the flow of your show. Like make sure that what one of my favorite podcasters refers to it as, make sure you have a branch to swing to. So like if you are, feel like your conversation is lagging or something like that, having like another segment that you can go to, or, like a specific part of your show that you can break it down into, can really help to keep the show moving.
100%. We did 3, which and threw the first one out completely. And there's more to that story, and I'll tell you all about it over coffee sometime, but we threw the first one out completely.
It's a good story. Yeah, Jacob, go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of piggybacking off that as well. I didn't do that. I started one episode at a time. I had them sketched out for almost a year in advance, but I didn't record multiples at the beginning. And since I released this episode this morning, that episode is a recap of all of the first 12 episodes. And going back and listening to those early episodes from a year ago, it was funny to hear how much it's changed as far as like some of the audio quality and like just my editing and transitions and those types of things, how much smoother those have gotten. So I probably could have benefited from that piece of advice, which is to record early and kind of work out some of those kinks instead of sort of learning along the way. But again, I was able to make it happen kind of going along the way. So if that's your style that works for you, feel free to kind of approach it that way as well.
Someone mentioned editing in the chat. I was just going to say what we personally use is Adobe Audition. I was able to get it through UK, so that's what I use for the show that we produce.
Great. We have another question that's a little bit further up in the chat. I want to make sure that's addressed before it gets lost. So you have your branding, that's important, but do any of you have experience with actually copywriting or trademarking the name of your show or your podcasting company?
We went through the copyright a little bit when we did the LLC. So that gets if you really want, you're going to spend a lot of money. You're going to spend some money on some attorney fees, and you're going to spend some money on application fees. And once again, it gets really complicated for like the hour that we have of just getting started with this. But if you want to discuss it sometime, I'm more than happy over the next little while, for any of you who work on UK. I'm on main campus, and I'm assuming my colleagues here would too, to talk to you about it.
Okay, great, thanks. There's another question from the chat. Do any of you have experience with Patreon? And if so, what kinds of things would you put on each tier?
So I feel like I'm taking it up. I'm sorry. Do either one of you guys use Patreon? We decided against it. So the reason we decided against it is, thankfully, we are all professionals and make a decent living. And you can get caught up if you're doing it correctly, specifically if you have a limited liability corporation, as far as the taxes, what you can actually make, what you'll get out of it. And at the end of the day, we've still never done it because the actual amount that we would get wouldn't be as beneficial, wouldn't cost the cover of my headache, right? It just wouldn't cover the cost of my headache. So we've decided not to do it. Now, I think in the next year or two, if things keep going well, probably some advertisers, and advertising is what I would just go with. But a lot of my friends, I have a lot of colleagues that use Patreon, and they have good experiences with it. I would rather have an advertiser than ask somebody to give me $5 a month.
Okay, Ryan, I see you kind of nodding a little bit. Do you have advertisers for your personal podcast?
We have had a couple, but it's mainly just been like not necessarily like cash exchanged, but like we had some local businesses that we wanted to highlight that we kind of traded some advertising with. It's more been like just handshake type situations. Our personal podcast, we've been doing it for about a year, but we don't have. I mean, we have still a pretty small listenership. It's mainly just a hobby for us, so it's not. I mean, we've discussed Patreon before, and what someone was saying was asking about like, you know, what kind of content to release, and that's the main reason that we haven't, is because if you do the Patreon, there's going to be additional work there because you have to create exclusive content for those, because there's always going to be the free version that people can download, so you have to make it worth it. So that's something that I definitely wouldn't start out with a Patreon unless you are really really confident. You may want to see what the workload looks like before you jump into doing the Patreon and the extra stuff there.
Yeah, and I would recommend just focusing on your content as well, and focusing on your audience and who you're trying to reach. I think those are going to be the foundation that you need before you can get to a level of something like Patreon or Apple subscriptions. Is a new thing that just rolled out in the last month or so. So asking people to pay for your podcast can potentially be prohibitive if you don't have enough of a following built up yet. But I really don't have any experience with that. We purposely wanted to make sure that we were ad free and had no subscriptions or anything like that, because it's part of what we do. This is actually a part of my job now. I've carved out some of my hours each week for this. So we try to keep it like the rest of our programs and basically being free across the board.
It looks like Benji was asking a question about Anchor. Did you have a specific question about Anchor? I used their website for the Kentucky Wildcast. You can either put that in
I
chat.
have a specific question. I just wanted to know your experiences with it.
So our personal podcast, the hosting we do through Libsyn has really good analytics, was one of the reasons we chose it. So you could see, you know, download episodes and things like that. Anchor, I would say, is a little bit weaker on the analytics side, but probably the best if you're starting out because they simplify everything a whole lot. So once you get approved through, you know, all the different hosting sites, you can basically just go straight through Anchor and it also creates a website for you. So I would say if you're just starting out and you're not like a web design type person, Anchor is a really good way to go to keep it really simple. But if you're looking for analytics and you know, being able to break down your listener base, then it may not be the best route to go.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the apps and kind of the microphones, but I know probably a big part about it is having a good, powerful PC with a good processor. So if one or more of you want to just kind of talk about that kind of setup that you have.
I mean, I just have the computer that I use for editing and everything is just the one that I have for my normal office work. So not super fancy at all. I also don't do the video side, which keeps it a little bit streamlined because I'm not as experienced with the video stuff. So maybe Joe can speak to that more.
Well, it's funny you asked that question, Carrie. Thank you so much, because I was working on my computer like 2 years ago before COVID. So I'm still limping along because we used to do some short films. I have a lot of experience with Adobe. I would, if you're going to do YouTube, my advice to you to make it as easy as possible is to use Zoom with the video, because it is so easy to edit and chop and put up than it was before. Before this, we were using a Canon 7. I can talk a little bit more about the cameras, with a Rode mic on top of capturing our other audio, and that just got complicated. So one of the better things that came out of COVID for us was just using Zoom continuously and just grabbing all of our video from there. So it's fairly easy. Adobe Premiere will work on most new laptops, but you may want to get a little higher processor, or if you have a desktop, a little higher processor. And then the one piece of advice I'd give you is an external hard drive, especially if you're because all the video takes up a lot of space. I just filled up a 4 terabyte. So
It looks like somebody asked about recording and content from multiple locations. That's actually the only way that we've recorded my all of my podcasts is over Zoom. The one that we do on the personal side to get better audio quality, we all record to our own computers into a program, but we're interacting over Zoom so that we can use our high level of audio quality rather than processing it through Zoom. Which has worked really well for us. We just use we actually use a time.is, which is just a website that always shows the time. We just sync up our recordings. So that, I mean, that's really worked well for us. If you can record it in person, you need a lot higher quality equipment. So that has also kind of prohibited us as well. You can get away with really good quality audio if you're separate, if you're not in the same room.
Yeah, ours has all been remote as well since we started in the middle of the pandemic, and I think it would definitely change things, how you, I guess, interact with your guests. But I've kind of done a couple of different ways. I've used Zoom, particularly with guests that I didn't know as well, because it has the video aspect to it. The other site that we use, which actually preserves the audio quality a little bit higher, is called CleanFeed. And that's a free one as well, but it's pretty bare bones. It doesn't have the video component or anything like that to it. So it's can be difficult maybe if you don't know, or if you have kind of crosstalk or anything like that. So I usually reserve that for guests that I know a little bit better, and ones that I don't necessarily need video, or I don't have multiple guests on the show or anything like that at one time. So that's another option that it's free, that's available to you as well if you want to check that out.
Okay, Joe, I know that you started out as an in-person podcast and you're doing video and audio. And how has that changed for you during the pandemic? I know you guys do in separate locations. You have one of your hosts that doesn't even live in the state sometimes, and that kind of gets tricky. How is that navigating for you?
Well, life got slightly easier when we just had to do it on Zoom. It's overly complicated because you're shooting on a Canon 7 over there, and then you're getting your audio from another place with a laptop set up. So then you have to put all that together. Just transferring it from the camera to the computer would take forever sometimes. So Zoom just made everything easier, and Zoom got better. So we'd used a couple of different things where we'd done interview programs beforehand. Skype, you can record through Skype, but it's just nothing works as well, in my opinion, as Zoom, and nothing is as user friendly. So this is probably a little bit for you folks who want guests. It's so easy because not everyone is good with technology. It's so easy to send them that little Zoom link and they can just click it, and then you can walk them through it, and then you can push record and they're done. And it's just made my life easier because it's Bonehead Weekly. We're weekly. We rarely take off a week. We took off a week 2 weeks ago, and that was the first one we had taken off, actually, I think, since the pandemic had began. So that's every week. Our shows can run an hour, 2 hours, depending, sometimes a little more, but usually right around an hour and a half. And that's a lot of content. So we have a lot of content. So that's just the reason I say Zoom. We just can't spend a ton of time going back and editing because I have a full-time job, kid, and all the other things that go along with life. Did I answer your question, Carrie?
Yes, you did. Thank you. And you brought up content, and I think that's a really good point. So I'm going to try and go to the other two guys because I do know you quite a bit. We can get you to last, Joe. How do you choose who you're going to interview? How do you choose the topic that you're going to talk about for each episode?
I can go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, sure.
I'm fortunate enough. I have kind of a defined segment of what we're approaching. So we're looking at well-being and specifically kind of resilience. So all of our topics have experts attached to them. So I seek them out kind of based on these different dimensions of our well-being. So we may focus specifically on, say, something like sleep, or we may kind of go a little more broad into something like, I don't know, like emotion, or emotional health or something like that. And so I am fortunate also to work with a bunch of experts in these areas. So the way that we're kind of set up is that my job is a lot more sort of nebulous compared to a lot of my coworkers who have specialties and as like registered dietitians or something like that. So I have a lot of people to already draw from. And so you'll see in the first 12 episodes, we pretty much cover a lot of my colleagues in HR that work in these different areas. But I knew with the university as well, we have more than enough experts in all of these different areas of well-being to continue to have episodes. So my goal was to really only feature people that are from the University of Kentucky, because I knew I should have a pretty deep pool of potential people. So that's actually how I narrowed down. So building on that, I actually asked for recommendations. So if there are things that people want to hear about, you can always email us and let us know. And that way we can find an expert. And so in the survey that we went out with today's episode as well, we're asking for potential guests, potential topics and those types of things, because I want it to be interactive and I want some input in those things as well, rather than me kind of attaching it to some event that we have or a particular challenge that may be present at a certain time, something like the pandemic, where we could focus on something that, like, again, kind of like stress or burnout or something like that.
Great, thanks. Ryan, what about you?
So the two shows are extremely different. So our comedy show, we text back and forth and just honestly try to think of ridiculous questions that we want to talk about and that we think we can make funny. We've discovered that the topic is not as relevant as long as we are having fun. It doesn't really matter. For the other show, for the Kentucky Wildcast, like Jacob said, I actually send out emails to the staff senate and just people that I know, asking for recommendations for exemplary staff members that maybe have a really cool story, even just outside of UK. It doesn't even have to be about what they do at UK. It's the point of that podcast is really just to highlight staff members as people. Just, humanizing the people at UK that may have a really cool thing that they do outside of their job, but also, are really good at what they do. Finding, the diverse aspects of people on campus.
Great, thanks. Joe, for those of us that don't know what Bonehead Weekly is about, how do you choose your content? Is there one of your friends that has preference for picking, or what is that process like?
It can be an argument because there's three of us, but we've been doing the same thing for 20 years as we're three best friends and not necessarily arguing about movies, but talking about movies, talking about pop culture, talking about filmmakers, talking about writers. So basically all we did was take our private conversations and made them available for everyone. So we may tackle a year like 1999, and why a lot of people feel like that is the new, for any of you film geeks out there, the new 1939 for great movies, or 1982 for any of these. And I could explain this in detail. We may do that over a two-parter and go through the actual weekly release and see, oh my God, that came out right around that time. Or we use a lot of interviews. So that takes time, especially if you're talking about people who are still directing, writing, making movies, making TV, writing books, trying to get those schedules up. So that takes time. That's a lot of social media connections. I do that. My friend Chad does that. James does that. You reach out, sometimes you cold call. So it's all about who would you like to talk to? Who's a director that really is great and you have to have them. Like, for example, we're all three Star Trek fans, and we had the director of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, on the show about 2 months ago, Nicholas Meyer. And that took me 6 months. And I finally wrote and forgive my language, a 3-page kiss butt letter. And that worked. And we were able to get him for an hour and a half. And that was a huge get for us. And then some of my connections outside of what I do as far as the convention work and moderating and interviewing, you meet people, they like you and they'll do the show, or they know someone who'll do the show. So to answer your question, Carrie, we have usually a board full of ideas, and then we kind of knock them off, and then things come up. Richard Donner, the great director, passed away last week. So in 2 weeks, we've already recorded the show about his career. Things just kind of come up. It's like, well, we should probably talk about him.
Yeah, if you can be topical, that is also helpful because it can help with promotion as well. So we do that as well, like with just any comedy thing that we'd like the new Space Jam movie coming out. We had a topic about that and stuff like that. I wanted to talk about what Derek said. So I didn't actually have that experience. He said, do any of you all have group podcasts that have a diva in your group? difficult to work around. I was going to say, it sounds like Joe probably is the diva of his group. It's probably me and my group, but no, I don't think we really have that problem. And I think it reinforces the importance of the ability to have a working, like a very cooperative relationship with anybody you have on the show with you. I mean, Jacob is mainly by himself on that with just an interview, but I don't know how many people Joe has on his show. Is it you and two others?
Yeah, it's me and two others, and I actually have an answer for him too. So please.
Okay. So I actually have strong feelings that I think three hosts or three people is the best number to have on a podcast, because there's never downtime. So that was kind of like me and one other guy had wanted to start this show, but knew we needed a third. And so when we found that third person that we really worked well with, I mean, we never have a problem with like lulls or anything like that, because when you have three, there's always somebody to jump in. But definitely, if you have someone who's going to dominate the conversation, you would have to have a conversation about maybe they're like leading the show, or they're like the person who's kind of directing it. But you would for sure need a conversation, because that's super important if you're doing a multi-host podcast.
Yeah, I have a big personality, and the other two are much more shy, but they're both, when you've been around somebody for 20 years, it's fine for them to attack and shut me down too. The thing that I would say is that even though we're best friends and been together a long time, we still say things that aggravate the other two or have difference of opinions. And that's what you want as a listener. And Carrie can probably talk about this. That's what she wants, is for us to get into it at some point and actually hear the feelings of it. I'm going to, but it's a job. And anybody who thinks it's not a job and you're just doing it for fun, if you do it weekly, or if you do it a lot like we do, it's work. It's fun, but it's work. And it's work that you may not be getting paid for, but it's still work. So you just got to be a certain amount of professionalism and let that go at the end. And if you got somebody being an actual diva, then just move on. Life's too short.
Or if you are the diva, just go at it alone, I guess.
Should always have that nice conversation with yourself. So there was kind of a follow-up. It's been my experience that if you have issues with someone early on in doing a podcast, you will always have issues, and it will just get worse over time. That was from Derek. I think, just being in, not really broadcasting, but I did some acting a while ago myself, and sure, I think you can have that. I think you can have that anywhere in your life, and it's just about dealing with different personalities. If anybody has like a really quick story that they want to tell, go for it. If not, we can move on.
Nothing I would share on here, but we
Sure.
have had personal disagreements,
Mhm.
but we're still very close. But it is a partnership and it is work. That's just something I want to remind. If you're going into this with a couple of people, you're taking on their personalities and their input.
That's a really good point. Thank you. So it looks like we usually try to wrap up at about, I teach classes on dealing with difficult people. Oh, good for you, Bobby Joe. Okay, so yeah, thank you, Veronica. We're actually going to wrap up with that question. If anybody else has another question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask it, or pop it in the chat. Like I was trying to say, we usually try to keep this about 50 minutes. I know people have to wrap up and get back to their offices, so we've got about 10 minutes left to go. Let's see.
I can start with that.
Absolutely, go
drum up
ahead.
the audience question.
Yeah.
So you will find very quickly that is the number one problem in podcasting, because unless you're paying for advertising, really and this sounds cliche, the best way is word of mouth. So just continuing to convert listeners that are true fans that will listen no matter what, and then that will tell their friends. So the reason that you hear podcasters sign off every show with "please subscribe and tell a friend" is because that's the best way to grow a show. So everything about podcasting is slow. There's not, unless you are already a celebrity, everything about podcasting is slow. So you just have to honestly, and what I was told what I was told and what we've listened to is don't even look at the numbers for a long time. Just find yourself having fun and make sure it is a topic that you're passionate about. I think that's one of the most important things about podcasting is people want to hear the passion and hear the, the people who this is what they want to talk about. And that's what's interesting. So, finding that niche or whatever it is that you have a passion for, and just do the work for a while and don't worry about how many people are listening, because if people like your content, it'll continue to grow. It's, again, most growth is very slow but steady. So just keep doing the work. The main thing is consistency. Like what Joe does is really the best way to do it, is have it come out every week and don't skip a week. That's how you really grow a listener base. Other than social media, get out there, try to tag some people, get some guests on that might be able to share audiences with, is really the best thing that we've found. Is like, I'm probably going to see if Joe wants to come on our show. Maybe I'll go on his show. That we can have some cooperation there. But yeah, when you can share listener bases, that's a good way to start, at least.
And for $50, I don't mind speaking anywhere. The advantage I have over some other folks is that I have a base up until COVID of a whole side gig thing of doing the conventions. And if you have Lexington Comic-Con and the office people you're there and they just left, I have 500 people go, I'm Joe Lewis, Bonehead Weekly. I've got a whole table here of free stickers. I give away stickers. Last 2 or 3 years, they're just great. People love to get stickers for some odd reason. Tried business cards, didn't work, but stickers, they love them. So if you have the ability to get it out there or drop those things off, so people, and that goes back to also having cool cover art. If you can pay an artist to do that, it's great. And I will be more than happy to hook you up with several people who will do it for a reasonable price.
Yeah, and I would say too, I'm kind of in a different scenario as the other two, with it being internal, and our audience really is UK employees. It's kind of the predominant audience. So they're kind of already built in. So it's trying to reach all of our employees. So things like this are a great opportunity for us to grow. But I also have to shout out our HR communications team, because they help with a lot of that cross-promotional type of stuff with social media and those types of things. And that's, I mean, if you're talking about growing your podcast, you're going to have to do a lot of that stuff. So really focusing on the actual content, but then putting in the work on the other end of it, of just getting it promoted, because you could have some really great content, but if you don't have any way to get it out, people may or may not find it. So you kind of have to work a lot of different channels and be willing to try a lot of different things, and be willing to kind of pivot every chance that you get. So if you find something that looks interesting, try it and see what works for you. And it's probably going to take multiple things. We can't just say, just do emails or just do social media or anything like that. It's got to be pretty comprehensive, really. And we're still trying to unlock that.
And I think Derek brought up in the chat, looking at custom music. So it's a good point, because you won't be able to just use a song as your theme song. You'll get banned, and they won't let you post it. So either having permission, which we got permission from a local band that had a song that we wanted to use. So we just thank them on every episode, or custom music, or you can also get copyright free music on a lot of different places online as well, which I use for the Kentucky Wildcast.
I would also say that you have to get over being a little bit shameless. That was really hard for me. I was not a self-promoter at all. So learning to shamelessly plug yourself any opportunity that you get, things like putting it on your email signature and that type of thing too are really helpful. And those are kind of easy ways, especially if you are one of those people who have a harder time kind of breaking out of that shell and promoting yourself rather than promoting something else or somebody else. Those are easy ways to do that. You can set up a link tree and have an easy, quick link that people can always click and find too.
Yeah. There's a question about social media. Yeah, we use them all. I think I handle more of the Facebook. My friend James handles more of the Twitter. I think that's what we could get better at. I think we should do more Twitter than we do the other one. But honestly, a lot of our followers use Facebook, which is probably speaks to our demographic, which is a little older as well. We're not getting the 17, 18, 19-year-olds. But yeah, you need to use all social media and you need to use it often. And it's very time consuming on top of all the other work that you're doing as well.
Yeah, our main interactions are on Instagram, so it just depends on where your base finds you. You know, where it grabs traction. Twitter's great because if there's a trend that you can relate to, you might be able to get on to, like, we have a Chuck E. Cheese episode, and so when they were trending a while ago, we hopped on that and got a few listens off of that. But yeah, I'll agree with Joe. We also struggle with social media, so it's you really have to embrace the shamelessness to promote on social media and just be okay with posting all the time. And we haven't really gotten good at that yet either.
Yeah, we hadn't talked about LinkedIn yet either, and that was one that a few months into the podcast, I realized, oh, I should probably be using this. I'm connected with a lot of people that are from the University of Kentucky, and that was LinkedIn. I mean, I very rarely ever used it. I probably had 2 posts prior to starting a podcast, and so now that's become like a key feature of my LinkedIn profile as well. So especially if you're on the professional side of things with a podcast, but even if you're not, even if it's just a personal thing, I think that's a good avenue because there are a lot of connections, especially when you get those like random connections of people all the time trying to add you on LinkedIn to connect. Those are great ways to share it with people you may not know as well, depending on how you regulate your own social media.
Great, thanks. And that is a really good point of knowing your base and knowing where the best way to connect with your base is and growing it from that way. LinkedIn, I wouldn't have thought that either Joe or Ryan would, use that as part of their regular thing, but I can see, Jacob, where that is really, really helpful for you. One that you guys didn't mention was TikTok, and I am not a TikTok user myself. I know it's its own special place, and we've got just a couple minutes. So how do you guys feel about promoting on TikTok?
You go, Ryan.
Okay, so we have a TikTok. Well, I think we've posted twice in the year that we've had it. I genuinely think I just don't understand it enough to be able to make it relevant or useful. Instagram is probably my limit. That's probably about as hip as I can get. So there's only so much you can do unless you go viral. The like I said before, the social media stuff is helpful, but still, word of mouth is king.
Yeah, I'm with him. Like I said, my friend James handles most of the Twitter. I handle most of the Facebook, and we do a little Instagram. And Ryan feels that he's too old, and he's 20 years younger than me. So TikTok, I'm just not there yet. I have colleagues who are there yet, but it's just one more damn thing that I don't have time for on top of all of it. But it would be great. Totally take advantage of it, especially if you're good at it.
Absolutely. I'll use a growth mindset here and say that HR Health and Wellness does not have a TikTok yet. Maybe that's something we'll get into, another avenue for creativity. So maybe be on the lookout. If that's something you want to see, let us know.
And somebody made a great comment that Instagram Reels is TikTok anyway. I think that's probably right. It's Instagram Reels and Facebook Story that popped up a lot, and it's been hitting to the tops of my personal feeds a lot too. So that's a really good way, a quick way to grab people's attention. I think is to pop yourself on Reels or on Facebook Story. We're kind of running out of time here, so I see Ryan's popped his links in the chat.
Ryan beat me to it. I looked over. The guys are
I
already.
know you guys were great. Thank you. Okay, so I think we have.
I think I answered Rodney's question.
Rodney's
Rodney,
questions about.
if you have additional questions, you can email me as well, or I'm sure any of us.
Yeah, I know, Joe, you have people in different locations. I know James, when he is not in the state, you're dealing with that. And then, in the pandemic, you guys are each at your separate secret locations and not in Bonehead Weekly Studios. So
I own Bonehead Weekly Studios. It's called The Basement.
I know, I was trying to be nice.
I know. I just want everybody to know, I'm not giving you my address, but you can totally email me anytime. I'm here at UK, I'm in POT. So for all of our fellow, I'm more than happy to meet for coffee or lunch sometime and go through any of this with any of you. I'm in advising, so this week's a little busy, But after this week, please, and I'm sure Ryan's a little busy too, after this week, more than
Same.
happy to meet with any of you and talk about any of this.
Yeah, you'll find that any podcaster will talk to you about podcasting for as long as you want to talk about it.
Yeah,
Just
Ryan and I have
yes.
already had these conversations.
Yeah,
as
I was
well,
gonna say,
so yeah, definitely feel
Jacob and I
free.
had this conversation last year. So
Yes, and Joe, as I'm sure you guys have picked up, we're good friends. So we've talked a whole lot about Bonehead Weekly, and I hope to listen to more.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
you're one of my 2 listeners.
Oh, you have more than that. And yes, I'll be sure to pop in on Ryan's and Jacob's as well more too and listen to that. So everybody, again, just really encourage you to listen to these guys' podcasts. They're each great in their own way. And thank you guys so much for being on here, Ryan, Jacob, and Joe. I really appreciate you hanging in there and rescheduling and taking the time today to talk to everybody. This has been wonderful. We're going to end it here. And everybody have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you all.
anybody wants to talk audio equipment, I'll do that as well. I always love that.
Thank you.
If I could just show up and have some, that was the great thing about having a producer, is
Yep.
I would just show up. And I understand that you're so aggravated about it, but
Well, I just found out that we have a podcast studio 20 feet from my office that I'm gonna be using. It's all Rode Procasters with a Rodecaster Pro. I mean, it's soundproofed, ready to go. So I'm excited about that.
I was worried. I didn't want to promote it because I didn't want them to get flooded.
Oh
but,
no,
I was kind of anticipating.
I'm not gonna. Nobody here can use it. I'm not telling you where it is.
Yeah, I know there's a couple locations on campus that I know of, and I didn't want to promote them just in case they didn't want it to be promoted. But I hope to be able to use them when we're back on campus.
I was gonna say,
too.
whenever we have you on Kentucky Wildcast, we're gonna record over here.
That'll be perfect.
I was just
Adam,
gonna
will
stick
someone
around
be
and see if we had any questions.
recording the sharing? That usually gets posted onto the staff Senate website. Thanks, Chris. And if my fellow former senators, if any of you want to share that, please do so. I think it would be of interest, at least to the people that signed up to be here. I think that would be helpful.
all right. Any questions before I go? Anything? Just hanging
I
around?
don't think so. I think we're just hanging around. If you need to hop off, feel free. No worries. All right, good to see you.
Wonderful talking to you all. Enjoyed it.
Bye,
All right.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Y'all, thanks a lot.